Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly, as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads, and if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show, and if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Hello, everybody. It's John, Pollock, and Wai Ting. Welcome to Rewind the Tape.
Oh, it's going to be a good one.
Oh, it's going to be a good one, folks. We've got lots to discuss from tonight's edition of Dynamite. An astounding show on many levels. How are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, not bad. I don't even know what to say.
Well, we can wait. Maybe we'll put a countdown clock in the top left-hand corner, and we'll count down to when we talk about the security footage that was released, that escaped from Wembley Stadium. I mean,
we're even doing going to have this conversation. It's amazing. It is like, I'm just trying to put into perspective. Like, if you told me 10 months ago, we will be reviewing the backstage footage of that fight. It really is amazing.
You know, tomorrow we're gonna get lip readers analyzing this video. If there's the level of care that comes after this video, I question that there is going to be that. Well, this being professional wrestling, I'm sure there will be.
This is going to be footage that'll be studied like the JFK assassination.
I don't know.
To come.
I don't know.
We will have every little every person in that room is going to be interrogated about what exactly their perspective was. We're going to get reenactments. Oh, Dark Side of the Ring, 2027. Yeah, I'm sure they're casting the reenactments right now.
My name is Albert Castillo, and I run the Nando's adjacent to Wembley Stadium, and I served CM Punk an excess order of chicken.
Oh, goodness.
You know who I was, along with I think many wrestling fans. I think we were all at one point in that video Chris Hero.
He was certainly embodying, I think, a lot of how we all felt.
I mean, they couldn't have asked. I mean, if you're CM Punk, could you have asked for a better location than directly in front of this security footage that they were able to get a hold of? Like, this didn't happen in some locker room or some alcove of this gigantic stadium. Like, they could not have been in any more perfect view for this shot of this stationary camera above. Like, could you? I mean, it just. So much of it.
Either this entire building has a camera attached to every nook, or I mean, this was just really kind of happenstance,
This is the second greatest perfectly set up security footage in the history of combat sports, behind the all-timer when Yoshihiro Akiyama fought Kazushi Sakuraba and was accused of greasing in the fight. And they found the security footage of him greasing in preparation for the fight. And it was a very black mark on Yoshihiro Akiyama's Japanese career.
You know what? Maybe this is only just as controversial.
So there you have it. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but just getting everyone up to speed, we did a Tuesday edition of Rewind-A Raw. That feels like 3 days ago, but it was only yesterday, for a full rundown of the Raw following WrestleMania. And then up next was Back Today, as was Pollock and Thurston. We went through all the key stories coming out of WrestleMania weekend, the messaging from the company, He Who Shall Not Be Named, discussing him at length, and then a lot of the WrestleMania business notes and such. So a guestless edition of the show, but no shortage of stuff for Brandon and I to navigate as well on today's show. So you can check that out up on YouTube and the Post Wrestling and WrestleNomics feeds. And you can buckle up for a lot of shows coming your way, because we have got on Thursday, what do we have? A 1-2 punch from WH Park?
Yeah, we actually have MCU later coming out, talking about the past two editions of X-Men 97. That'll be out in the Post Wrestling Cafe. And from what WH tells me, maybe the best edition of the series thus far.
I've seen so much praise for this episode, and I'm still behind on last week's episode. So I have 2 episodes of X-Men to watch. I'm so pumped for this episode because everyone's just said that's one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. I was like, wow, this is. Now, my question, have you seen this episode?
I have not. No, I haven't even seen last week. So I didn't even hear about the praise that it's been receiving other than from WWE.
I mean, this is limited to like some posts I've seen from various people, but they all seem to be heaping praise on this latest episode. But my bigger question is, did you watch the finale of Curb Your Enthusiasm?
I haven't even been watching the season.
No.
But, oh, wow. Okay. Was there a... I mean, spoiler free, please. Was there something very monumental? Did it beat the series finale of Seinfeld?
I didn't watch it. I'm not a Curb viewer. I thought you were.
I was. I really haven't been keeping up, but
okay.
Sorry, not much of a review on this show. Okay. We have enough to review.
That's it. If there's not security footage, I'm not that concerned.
Post Pro Res with WH Park, 2 nights at WH Park. That'll be Friday with Post Pro Res, and then also Friday, I will be back with John Pollock for Rewind-A-Way, a delayed version of Rewind-A-Way, as John and I talk about Rock versus Hogan, February 18th, 2002. The night after the NWO's arrival into the WWE.
Which they also caught on camera, this explosive crime that was committed outside of the Allstate Arena by the NWO.
Cameras are everywhere. You got to watch them, especially when you're trying to, T-bone somebody using a semi-truck.
Yeah. Yes. So tune in for the attempted murder angle to set up WrestleMania 18. That's coming up on Friday, a special edition of Rewind-A-Way this week. And then taking you into the weekend, we have Rewind to SmackDown on the Cafe with Neil Flanagan and Wai Ting. Mm-hmm. And Saturday, Collision Course, where they are going to be devouring 3 hours of AEW. Collision and Battle of the Belts 10. I think of those 3 hours, we have 1 match announcement so far.
Yes, correct.
With Roderick Strong and Rocky Romero in a Battle of the Belts Eliminator match. They are not even wrestling for a title. They are wrestling for a title eliminator.
Battle of the Belt Eliminators.
Battle of the Eliminators. I can't wait. Yeah. Yes.
Bless John Cena, bless Kate from Montreal, already devouring as much wrestling as they have over the past weekend, choosing to stay an extra hour to catch up on Battle of the Belts for all of us. That'll be in the Post Wrestling Cafe, but that's not the only show coming out on the Post Wrestling Cafe this weekend.
No, because we have also got New Japan's Windy City Riot that is going down. Karen Peterson and Bruce Lord will have a show on Saturday, the day after, and we'll get into the lineup in the news. But that's going down on Friday. Saturday, you've got 3 hours of AEW and UFC 300, which we will be doing a review of Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern. Jack Winan will be with me as we go through one of the most loaded cards in UFC history, and we'll go over those fights as well in the news. And then you can cap off your weekend the only possible way. And the one saving grace of tonight's show was after that footage aired, I thought of 4 people, and they all comprised the NWA podcast. I cannot wait. I want frame by frame analysis from Chris from LA watching this. I mean, I'm gonna make some popcorn on Sunday night. I'm just gonna sit back, and I can't wait for like hour 4.5 of the NWA podcast when they get around to Phil.
This really does feel like the real WrestleMania of the month, doesn't it? This episode we're about to talk about. So I can't wait for the NWA to discuss it. Spend 5 hours on it, just this topic alone. I beg you.
So all of that coming your way, postwrestling.com, and if you so choose, postwrestlingcafe.com, that gives you all of the bonus shows, and you will be overloaded with them over the next couple of nights. And then as well, if you are a Double Double or Espresso member, you get access to our audio updates that go out throughout the week. And of course, again, Rewind-A-Way dropping on Friday. Have you started Raw? I'm
halfway through.
Okay. Easy watches, these 2 hour Raws from 22 years ago.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's get into the news. And this is just breaking tonight. Aki Bono, real name Chad Rowan, has passed away, only 54 years of age. He died of heart failure after several reports coming out of Japan. He had initially suffered a medical issue back in 2017 and dying, just over the past 24 hours with his family, noting the passing. He was originally born in Hawaii and became the first non-Japanese wrestler to gained the title of Yokozuna in 1993 and was a prolific sumo wrestler for years in Japan before he made the transition over to combat sports. And he was involved in one of the most famous fights in history on New Year's Eve 2003 at the K1 Premium Dynamite event in Nagoya against Bob Sapp. And this was at the peak of Bob Sapp's phenomenon, that to this day you could not comprehend how popular Bob Sapp was during that 2002 to 2004 period. So this is right in the middle of it against a famous Yokozuna in Akibono, and they were going to have a K1 fight. And at its peak, this fight was watched by 54 million viewers. So when we are about to lose our minds that Cody and The Rock hit 3 million viewers in their quarter hour, 54 million viewers watched this fight on New Year's Eve 2003, which is even more impressive when in Japan, the traditional Red and White Festival is the programming that you watch on New Year's Eve. And they were able to go against that, draw this audience on top of Pride running a New Year's Eve show and Inoki running a show on New Year's Eve as well. But K1 was the big winner that night when it came to the combat sports menu.
So according to a quick Google, in 2003, Japan's population was 127.7 million. You're telling me almost half of the population watched this match?
This was the share was something, I can't remember what the exact share was. It might have been around a 47 share or something for this fight, which would mean almost half of the televisions that were on at that time were watching this fight. It was just a cultural event that, we have not experienced that in North America in our lifetimes, and probably never will, to the degree of if. As people look at the size of it, your biggest WrestleMania, this past Sunday's WrestleMania, if it had been broadcast on NBC, it would do several million viewers. I would be hard pressed to imagine it topping 7 million viewers. That's just putting it into perspective. That's a great number for network television, but it does tell you just the the level of something like this is not that far off from outside of a Super Bowl, what this was able to attract. And then, he got involved in professional wrestling in a pretty sizable way. He worked for a ton of different promotions in Japan, including becoming a 2-time Triple Crown holder with All Japan. He formed teams with Ryota Hama, Keiji Muto, and wrestled for 0-1, wrestled for Dragon Gate, DDT. He became a novelty figure and had a pretty extensive run in All Japan, not just the Triple Crown title that he won the Champion Carnival in 2015, and for North American audiences in 2005. So remember, this is just over a year after this big fight with Bob Sapp. He came in and did the sumo fight with the Big Show, Paul White, which, Paul White has routinely spoken about what a team player he was to go along with this. This would probably not be among the more memorable matches in WrestleMania history. Maybe maybe on a specific list this would be your most memorable. But this did not lead to much for Akibono in WWE, and one of the more bizarre concepts that they came up with.
I'm a lot more grateful for the celebrity integration that they seem to have stuck with these days.
Yeah, I don't see Logan Paul doing a sumo contest anytime soon. But anyway, rest in peace to Akibono, a pretty celebratory figure when it comes to sumo wrestling. And then, he didn't have a sterling combat sports record in kickboxing or MMA, but he was a big celebrity, and he transferred that to pro wrestling and got a number of years of big paydays at the peak of MMA and kickboxing in Japan in the mid 2000s. Let's go over to Raw from Monday night, because it was a tremendous number that they drew. 2,362,000 viewers and a .83 in the demo, averaging 1,092,000 among the 18 to 49 audience. The first hour, which was commercial free, did 2,860,000 viewers, peaking in the third quarter with The Rock and Cody Rhodes hitting 3.19 million viewers and over 1.4 million in the 18 to 49 demo. Levels that are astounding that they were able to hit And this just grew and grew. Now, they did have the benefit of no ad breaks during this 45 minutes, but as I was stating to Brandon, I would have loved to have known if they had just gone, like how much more this would have grown. It's not as though they had, like there was very little to the segment when it came to like substance. A lot of it was just two big stars in the ring and you had a purpose to it and setting up the match. But I mean, if you had the curiosity to drag this out to be the full hour, I think these two could have pulled it off. And I would have been really interested to see if this number just kept growing. Because man, when this ended, huge part of the audience tuned off. Although, I mean, it was still right through the end of the show, still a very strong number, right up until the end of the third hour when you had like 1.8 million watching the main event.
I mean, at that point, it probably becomes that much more of a challenge to make it compelling. You might even risk, more of a critical or sort of artistic detriment to it at that point. Has the show ever reached, when was the last time the show reached 3 million, past 3 million for a quarter? Do you recall?
I mean, you'd have to go back a number of years to when the show was like you've seen this precipitous decline over the last 8 to 10 years. But I mean, like for instance, we were looking at the Raw After Mania numbers, like 2014 and 15, like they were doing like 5 million viewers on average over the 3 hours as well. But I mean, it's been years since we have seen a segment reach this much, and the growth in particular was like it was incredible from the first quarter and just grew and grew and grew for these 45 minutes. So it was a tremendously successful commercial-free hour.
And it probably means the next time Dwayne comes around, if he wants to be on TV, he will be on TV for as long as he wants.
You put this guy on early, so you don't have a hard time to get out at the end of the show, and you just let him go. And if he is not on TV until next year, and you're on Netflix, you're not going to be bound by these hard outs. So put him on whenever you want.
Is there as much incentive to put him on Netflix versus SmackDown on USA?
I think they're going to put all their big guns for that Netflix launch. I think it's very important to them that they come out of the gate and just like they can become sort of the builders of live quote unquote sports on Netflix. I think that's going to be where they're going to put all their emphasis as opposed to, we're going to see when SmackDown moves to SmackDown will already be on USA by that point. And still, we have not got that news yet of what is to become of Raw for the final 3 months of this year. Mm-hmm. Their deal is up. They have stated that some announcement is going to be coming, but Raw does not have a home for the last 3 months because they won't start on Netflix till January.
I'm pretty confident they'll find a home.
You think they'll be okay? You think you don't think they'll just go dark for 3 months?
I'm pretty confident that some channel out there will want these will want this product that's on fire right now. I guess the question is who's willing to pay whatever price they must be looking for.
Again, for all of the success that this Raw number had, they were going against the Iowa-Purdue men's final, which did 14.8 million viewers. So they were up against a big game. Canada, they did 360,300 viewers, fourth for the night in sports, which was a pretty competitive night. They had a Jays game they were against, a Leafs game, and the NCAA men's final. They finished fourth. NXT did 647,000 viewers and a 0.19 in the demo, so up a very small amount in the audience and down 5% in 18 to 49. And NXT had a number of interesting news items coming out of it. The first was Braun Breaker and Baron Corbin dropping the tag titles, and then Braun Breaker giving his farewell speech that they posted after the fact. But he's, I guess, in the draft as well. So after this big signing with SmackDown, where he ends up, but this was the swan song. And I'll say, like, I think that this team was a lot of fun to watch these two together. I think it revitalized Baron Corbin, and he said as much in this speech. And I'm glad that they kind of fell into this tag team because I think it did a lot for Corbin, and it was something for Braun Breaker to at least have something to bide his time with that felt worthwhile in NXT and not like this guy was just spinning his wheels.
Very much so, and I think it showed maybe more of a diversity, for what he's able to provide, and it could very well be an act that makes its transition all the way to the main roster.
We also had several main roster performers showing up. Ivar came out to confront Obafemi and set up a North American title program. the Final Testament have made their way back to NXT, all of them. Karrion Kross and AOP attacked the new tag champions, Nathan Frazier and Axiom, and then held up the NXT tag titles. So from WrestleMania to the Performance Center in 48 hours, we have got the Final Testament now. Does this officially end the program with Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits?
Well, Karrion Kross is still going to face Bobby Lashley, so I wouldn't say so. In fact, you might see more of the Final Testament than ever, with maybe appearances both on Tuesdays and Fridays.
And just a few other things. They're going to do Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams next week in a steel cage match. And then the following 2 weeks, April 23rd and April 30th, will be Spring Breakin', which is going to include Ilya Dragunov defending the NXT Championship in 2 weeks' time against Trick Williams, with the stipulation that if Trick loses, he has to leave NXT, which is interesting because they've pretty much tipped their hand that Ilya is leaving. But it could be a case of both of them leaving as well if Ilya just holds the title and then drops it at like a month from now, for instance, before he officially makes his jump up to Raw or SmackDown.
Possible, though. All this maybe suggests to me that we might see Trick stick around NXT for a while longer.
I think Trick should stick around. I think this should be the title win, and I would certainly worry about him going up now. Without having another, like he could still use a year in NXT, and I think that would be fine. And they're losing a lot in NXT, and he can be kind of your big player in. And like they're losing Braun, they're losing Ilya. It appears Roxanne Perez made it clear in this that she is going into the draft and threatening to take the title. Like that's three alone, and Carmelo Hayes is leaving too.
And why join the traffic jam of new talents that are heading up to this main roster when you can have the spotlight of NXT all to yourself, wait a while, wait another year, and then just come in feeling like a bigger star than you were?
We also saw he's been on Level Up, but Javon Evans, he's 19 years old. He's been wrestling for a number of years. It's not like this guy is just starting from scratch, but this guy has... He had a super fun match with Scripps and an even better promo beforehand. Like this guy has a ton of charisma, and I think he's going to be. He got the vignette treatment leading into this. I could see this guy being someone they very much get behind in this post WrestleMania, like getting some new names across. So he was worth bringing up. But maybe the most interesting omission on the show was Drew Gulak, who was not part of a backstage segment with the No Quarter Catch crew. And then when they came out, his name was removed from the Tron video on top of it. So no official update on his status, but that would suggest, the fact that his name was gone from the graphic, very hard not to tie this into what happened last week with Ronda Rousey's accusation and Gulak's response as well, that he's off TV now and looks to be out of this group.
Seems pretty obvious that would be the case. And, I guess we don't have any indication whether or not there's an ongoing investigation that might have, warranted something like this, or if this was a straightforward dismissal from the group. We don't really know at the moment. But it also doesn't necessarily surprise me, just given maybe what we know of the facts, that I guess this did happen, whether or not intentional, that something did happen. And the fact that Drew Gulak is hardly somebody who's, bulletproof, unfortunately, in this company. And that does play a major part.
It does. That is going to be a factor of who they're going to kind of put their neck out for and who is someone that is expendable. But anyway, those were the keynotes coming out of NXT on Tuesday night. Let's move on, and we will chat quickly about the cards coming up this weekend. The Windy City Riot takes place in Chicago. They're at over 6,100 tickets distributed, which is very good for a U.S. show for New Japan these days. Tetsuya Naito against Jon Moxley for the IWGP World Heavyweight title. Nick Nemeth against Tomohiro Ishii. Matt Riddle will take on Zack Sabre Jr. for the television title. It'll be an 8-man Riot Rules match where a team led by Eddie Kingston and 3 mystery partners take on Gabe Kidd and his 3 partners. Hiromu Takahashi against Mustafa Ali, which sounds great. Jack Perry, the man of the hour, will be taking on Shota Umino. El Phantasmo and Hikuleo take on Shane Haste and Mikey Nichols, Fred Rosser and Tom Lawler, and Royce Isaacs and Jarrell Nelson for the strong openweight tag titles. Stephanie Vacour takes on Azumi for the strong women's title. Minoru Suzuki against Ren Narita, and then a pair of kickoff matches as Mina Shirakawa and Viva Van take on Alex Windsor and Trisha Dora, and Matt Vandergrift takes on Zane Jay. So this is happening Friday night from Chicago. You can buy it as a pay-per-view on New Japan World, but does not come live, at least, with your subscription. I assume this is going to be similar like Stardom World, where the pay-per-view is eventually added to New Japan World, but live access, I think it's like 20 US is the cost for it.
Really good looking card. These cards are, to me, infinitely more interesting than the New Japan proper shows, just because of the mix of talent. I mean, in some ways, kind of feeling like a little mini Forbidden Door themselves. So I'm sure the crowd will be really hot. Even though we've all probably watched too much wrestling over the past week or so, I see several people making time for this one.
And we will see if people are going to be making time for UFC 300, which is also going down this coming Saturday night from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. It is headlined by Alex Pereira and Jamal Hill for the light heavyweight championship. Alex Pereira has come up from, after winning the title at middleweight, he lost the title to Israel Adesanya, came up to light heavyweight, and this guy has just had monster after monster. He beat Jan Blachowicz, then won the title in his last fight to win the vacant title, which it had been vacated by Jamal Hill last summer after he won the title and then tore his Achilles tendon. So he's coming back 9 months after an Achilles tear, which is a very difficult injury to come back from. They're scheduled for 5 rounds. I do not see this one going 5 rounds, but it should be entertaining while it lasts. There is certainly the question of, for part of this was that Dana White's fault that he had been putting it out, man, when you guys see the main event, it's going to blow your mind. Like, he was just putting this up, and they had no fight pen to paper on any of this. They went through so many different iterations. And then when they announced this, there was kind of a shoulder shrug by people that this was headlining the big UFC 300 card. I think it's still a very good fight. And overall, this is from top to bottom, an incredibly deep lineup. You have Zhang Wei Li and Yan Xiaonan for the women's strawweight title. Justin Gaethje against Max Holloway, which is 2 of the biggest action fighters in the history of this entire sport. Max Holloway is coming up again to lightweight. The last time he fought at lightweight was against Dustin Poirier in 2019, which was a relatively short notice fight. And this time he has had a lot of time to prepare for coming up in the weight class. And Justin Gaethje, this is going to be just an extremely violent fight, as Max Holloway has promised. And that's essentially what people are tuning in. This is for the BMF championship as well. So it is scheduled for 5 rounds, potentially. Then you've got Charles Oliveira against Arman Sarukian at 155 pounds. Bo Nickel, who is undefeated at 5-0 and could be a future middleweight champion. He is getting the main card treatment here because I think they see him as a gigantic star in the division, taking on Cody Brundage, who is a fine fighter for this stage of Bo Nickel's career when he has fought 5 professional fights, and his longest fight has gone about 2.5 minutes. Then on the prelims, it's former light heavyweight champion Yuri Prohaska against Alexander Rakic, who's coming back after a long-term injury. Aljamain Sterling, the former bantamweight champion, is coming up to 145 pounds to take on Calvin Kattar. Kayla Harrison makes her UFC debut coming over from the PFL. That's Kayla Harrison's photo right there that they've been on top of, to take on Holly Holm. And I think this is one of the most intriguing fights on the whole card. Everyone is going to be glued to see if Kayla Harrison can successfully make 135 pounds on Friday morning. I guess she gets 1 pound allowance, but this is a woman who competed in judo, won 2 gold medals at the 2012 and 16 games at 171 pounds, and has never fought below 145 in her career, coming down to 135. Like, it is, even if she makes it, I mean, this is a drastic cut for her as well. But in that photo there, I mean, looks like she'll make it, no problem. I mean, just based on like how do we not have an image here of this is like a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. She's been signed for months. This fight's been known for months.
I mean, I guess good question, but I guess they just like their brand of setups, and they want to see her in UFC shorts and all this stuff. So.
And then some other fights on the card of note, Sadiq Yusuf against Diego Lopez. Wei is a big fan of Sadiq Yusuf's fight breakdowns that he does on his YouTube channel.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Hanato Moicano against Jalen Turner, Jessica Andrade against Marina Rodriguez, and then Bobby Green takes on Jim Miller. Jim Miller fought on the UFC 100 card, the UFC 200 card, and now will fight on the UFC 300 card. Wow. There were actually, the only other ones who had the potential to do that would have been John Jones, who legitimately, had he not been hurt and had to deal with other problems, could have technically fought on this card, but he's not. He was on 100 and you know what? He was supposed to be on 200. Yes, yeah. He was. We could say scheduled for 200, not fight on 200. And the other one would have been Brock Lesnar, who did fight on 100 and 200 as well.
Okay. Does Jim Miller make 400?
90%, I say no, but I still keep the 10% open. Could this guy go another 8 years? Who knows? And then the opener is former bantamweight champion Cody Garbrandt taking on Davison Figueiredo. I mean, this is just an outstanding card from the UFC from top to bottom. So should have a ton of attention. And I was talking to Brandon today. It was interesting way that we had the back-to-back weekends for WWE and UFC, and yet this was sort of the weekend we were suggesting, do you see that cross promotion? There was none this past weekend, and it just seems both sides are in their lanes, and we're not seeing that cross promotion. And I wonder if, when I did bring that up to Dana White at the press conference, the infamous press conference, I mean, he did note the fact that, I definitely got the sense from him, he understands WWE's appeal, it's business, but he wants to be distinct from WWE. And that sort of seems to be outside of the Michael Chandler promo. There's been some crossover and running the arenas when they ran the Honda Center for the pay-per-view in February and Raw. Small things, but not hitting you over the head with cross promotion. And this would have been the week or weekends that we would have seen it.
Yeah, that is very peculiar now that you mention it. I mean, could it be just a case of them recognizing that neither of these events necessarily need that much more co-promotion, seeing that how big they are already?
Could be.
Or they just being that much more sensitive to perhaps not crossing what could be very, different fan bases to some people.
Maybe we could have had Joe Rogan screaming at the top of his lungs at the end of Raw and letting us all know about UFC 300. I don't think that would have happened.
He finished that story.
Well, we are about to start the story of AEW Dynamite. By the way, go check out postwrestling.com. Great stuff all week from Jack Winon, Andrew Thompson, the man just on fire, the whole crew at postwrestling.com.
What a team. What a team.
That is it. Well, tonight we are going to the Charleston Coliseum in Charleston, West Virginia. WrestleTix reporting 3,160 tickets distributed. Justin Roberts announces that the AEW title eliminator is going to kick things off as Samoa Joe comes out, but before he can get to the ring, he is jumped by Swerve Strickland, and a table is set up, and Swerve spears him through the table against the barricade, and this puts the match into jeopardy, and instead of opening the show, it would close the show.
Yeah, I would say this angle began, even outside of the, big main event of this backstage footage being aired, this felt like a very different edition of AEW Dynamite from our usual fare. This felt, I hate to, maybe kind of throw the comparison out there, but it felt more like a bit of a sports entertainment-y type of show, with your angle off the top to tease us about whether or not we would be getting the main event. I was definitely open to, seeing this type of booking and whether or not AEW would make it work for them. It was fine, but I don't know if it necessarily was something I enjoyed or just not enjoyed. I'm kind of neutral on it. It's hard for me to even just judge it right now. But what did you think?
I didn't mind kind of the chaotic start. The way they set this up was, this was the scheduled opening match, and now we've got to pivot because we weren't expecting this. And all of a sudden, out comes Penta, and out comes Adam Copeland. We got to go to the next match. I didn't mind throwing things, giving it that chaotic feel.
Essentially, it was a tease for what's coming up in the main event.
I guess the idea was you're going to stay tuned because they view Joe and Dustin Rhodes as the big match on the show that you're going to want to stay tuned for.
I don't know if anybody feels that. I get the set, I don't know, the sort of tie-in of getting a Rhodes versus a Samoan, in your main event of Dynamite, but it's hardly a match that I think anybody sees as any sort of tough to predict result. like, I don't know if this was an intriguing enough match to tease till the very end.
What if Joe handed Dustin Rhodes something in his hand, and at the end of the night we'd find out what was given to him?
I think they should have had Dustin say, "Hey everybody, Cody told me what The Rock gave him. I'm going to announce it, but you got to stay until 9:45."
They recap Trent's turn on Orange Cassidy and Chris Statlander confronting him in the back, and Renee is outside of Cassidy's locker room, and he is a man of few words, so few that he wouldn't even speak on this show, but he will have a match on Rampage and address the heartless actions of Trent Beretta. So, I mean, this was quite the promotion on this show for Rampage. I mean, they lined up the whole card for Rampage, they set up an angle for Rampage, and yes, we would have that by the end of the night. But first up is Adam Copeland and Penta for the TNT Championship. And they gave these guys a lot of time because this was going to be the only wrestling that you were going to be seeing in the first hour and 10 minutes of the show. But they went over 20 here. The announcers just state that we're flying by the seat of our pants because Joe and Rhodes was supposed to start the show. And we start off like it's a very measured approach where Penta is in control after hitting a double stomp and attacking him with chops, leg kicks, and then Adam Copeland busts out a flying head scissors, just like goes straight up and takes down Penta. And then we get the countdown clock, the countdown to the Young Bucks, and the release of this footage in the top left-hand corner.
Clearly the main event of the show, the real main event. Yes.
So the countdown clock is going. There is a Tope con Hero by Penta, and then he kicks at the neck of Copeland on the edge of the apron. We go into our second picture-in-picture break. Excalibur refers to Charleston as the Quebec City of the Appalachians. Like I will take your word for it. There's a leapfrog into a backstabber by Penta, and then Adam Copeland applies the execution. I think going back to 2002 when he was teaming with Rob Van Dam against Goldust and William Regal, thinking to himself, yeah, he does need a name for this, though, in this company.
You know, you can only have so many puns with Copeland, I feel.
I don't know if you can have any. It's
the Opeland. No. Well, we played this game already.
The Adamocution.
I really like Grindhouse as a name for his finisher, so he already won with that one. But I don't know if he needs one for this either.
Then he goes to an ankle lock, but Penta's out, tries for a Fear Factor on the edge, and then charges at Copeland, who power slams him on the edge of the apron, and things escalate here. On the floor, Copeland goes for a spear, doesn't hit Penta, but takes out Alex Abrahantes on the floor, and then it's Copeland hitting a Avalanche Code Red. Crowd is chanting along as Penta kicks out, and then Penta leaps off the middle rope for a reverse cross body, and in midair is hit with the spear as Edge comes off the ropes, Adam Copeland, and wins in 20 minutes and 41 seconds. I would say like it was like slow going for a little bit, and it's not like the crowd was like losing their minds, but this just like it simmered, it built, and I would say like they really got into the closing couple of minutes, and I thought the end sequence was very good. This was a very good match.
Sure, yeah. I would say maybe by AEW standards, it was an all right match because we're so used to seeing high level wrestling here. For my taste, I kind of felt it went a little bit long without being interesting enough. Copeland here gave like 90 of the match to Penta, and you know, in these sort of open challenges, it's not unusual to see that happen to put the guy over in defeat. Though I think Penta needed, to me, to do a little bit more memorable, either charismatic stuff or maybe even just in terms of offense, deliver something that much more spectacular to really take advantage of the spotlight and the time. I think what's also notable is to see whether or not, you know, with the open challenge that Copeland continues to like do the injury thing. Like he was really selling the neck here. They were trying to tell that story. Does that become a long-term injury that he carries throughout all of his matches from this point forward with title defenses? Yeah. Another interesting thing that maybe is worth mentioning is at some point, I don't know if you caught this, John, this little almost like, you know, telestrator drawing flashed mid-screen. And I don't think it's really...
I missed this.
Yeah, I don't think it's really meant to lead to anything. I only bring it up because like wrestling has kind of been known to use something like this. This might have just been a production error, like a map that they would have used to map.
I think this was how to get to the arena from the hotel.
But yeah, a number of people caught this.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
Indecipherable, at least to us.
the lights go out. Julia Hart appears and Brody King jumps Copeland from behind, and Julia Hart is ready to deliver the mist when Willow runs down, and Willow in battling Julia Hart still got a portion of the mist over her face, but not the paralyzing type. She seemed fine by this.
It didn't go in her eyes.
That's it. She avoided. Her cheek was willing to take the brunt of it. And then, it's Willow to check on Adam Copeland. We go to the back. Renee is with Jericho, complete with a Lion Hook shirt. And he is with Hook and Shibata. Hook brought in Shibata on his own, and Jericho goes over the strategy for their match tonight. He goes person by person, who's going to take who, and if you both sit under the learning tree and breathe the rarefied air of Jericho, we're going to do great tonight. And he walks off. Shibata uses his phone to explain bet, and then after Jericho leaves, says, "What's his deal?" And then goes to Renee, "I like your necklace." She was very touched by this. She appreciated the compliment.
I mean, he spent the time to type it and translate it. So I thought Shibata's voice app gimmick was really funny here. It's well done. It gives him something that beyond just, a guy who's ass kicker. And I think that goes a long way, for a North American wrestling TV show. Jericho's leaning a lot more into the heel stick. So they're really starting to set a clear direction for this one. And I think it's becoming interesting.
Yesterday marked 7 years since Shibata's match with Okada.
Wow. That's amazing.
2017. Yes.
Wow.
There's a video on the history of the Young Bucks and FTR with their Full Gear match in November 2020 that the Bucks won. Then FTR evening the series in Boston in April of 2022, and FTR winning the match at Wembley last year, and then the Bucks refusing to shake their hands at the end of that match. So it is 2-1 for FTR going into the match at Dynasty on the 21st. Before we hear from the Bucks, Renee is with Mark Briscoe and Eddie Kingston following their match at Supercard of Honor. Briscoe says he feels amazing, but he's in pain. They had a dog fight. Kingston says, "I'm beat up too." And then Adam Copeland enters, and he wants to make sure everyone is still good for Dynasty after their match that they had. Stokely is there with Willow, and Stokely wants Willow to challenge for the TNT title, and the crowd was very excited by this idea. Like, let's have the battle of the cable network champions. And Willow says, "No, that is not what I'm here for." She suggests to Adam Copeland, "What if we team up?" And then Copeland cuts her off and refers to himself, Mark Briscoe, and Eddie Kingston as the Rated Chicken Hawks. And then suggests, "Hey, what if you and I team up and take on Brody King and Julia Hart?" And Willow was kind of like just responding like, "Yeah, I was like just saying that." And then Hathaway apologizes to Eddie Kingston, stating in the past he smelt like Burger King and Newports. And then Adam Copeland is engaging in conversation with Mark Briscoe as just cuts away. I thought this segment was like a total, just pure chaos.
They were trying to balance maybe a few too many things here and there. Like certain people had jokes, and then certain messages needed to be more clearly delivered. By the end of it, I felt like they got their message across, and I felt like they got Stokely's personality across, Copeland's personality across. This is, I think, one of those things that's a bit of a give and take with AEW, and maybe segments like this that have bullet points but aren't necessarily scripted beat for beat. Some people like the organic feeling of something like this.
Well, I don't think that was going to be the most analyzed segment on this show, but I thought it was really wacky at points. The Young Bucks are in the back, and they set up the context by promoting Dynasty next weekend, April 21st, and their match with FTR to determine the new tag champions. The winners will become the first 3-time AEW tag champions, and their last match took place at All In last August, the biggest show in company history, and the biggest match they had been a part of, and the winners of that match would likely be coined the best team of this generation. But that same day, there was a backstage incident with the now forever known 2 individuals. One being the scapegoat, Jack Perry, a guy who reminds them of themselves. And some people have said, if you have a problem with Jack Perry, chances are you're the problem. The other individual, who they would not name, tried to make this entire show about himself. and he happens to be good friends with FTR. So Nick says, maybe FTR were the whole masterminds behind this backstage incident. And Matt, I thought this was pretty clever. I did get amused by this. Matt just stopped saying, hey, you can't just spread rumors that you don't know to be fact and bash someone on a public forum. You can't just say that. Yes, very unprofessional. The Bucks then state that because of this backstage incident with these two individuals, they were thrown off their game. They had to put their EVP hats on. The locker room was in disarray. Respectable journalists needed answers, and they feel there should be a big asterisk next to FTR's win at All In. They had to deal with a high school scrap, and the ramifications threatened to take down their biggest show ever. So with that, they go to the footage. And what I did like the fact is that they did not put any ambient sound over this. It was just silence. And I think that did work for what they were trying to convey here. That it was, I mean, whatever your thought was, I think everyone was at least curious to see this. I mean, it's just natural human psychology of something secret that we're going to reveal. Whether it was effective or not, I think this was at least, engaging for people to actually see the footage. And this was not grainy footage. This was not like who's who here. Like this was all like, it was very clear who all the principal characters were here and the supporting cast in the backstage area. Save for who were seated at the monitors, one of which you can assume was Tony Khan.
If I sent you a link to a fight on World Star that everybody has been talking about and dissecting that resulted in a man's firing from a company that's been discussed for 10 months, would you not watch? Of course you would. My mom would want to watch this.
Okay, now let me throw this out to you though, okay? If we take out that intrigue and you just watch this video cold, would this necessitate you sending me this link and say, John, look at this fight?
Of course not. No, it's not about the fight. It's about who's in the fight. It's about what it's all about.
It's like what Paul Levesque said. It's not about the moves. It's about the emotion.
That's exactly it. Yes, I'm sure he would have loved this. Let's talk about it.
So they show the footage of, so this is backstage at All In. Jack Perry has come back from his match. You know what I think we should actually do is, before we talk about this video, let's go back to the MMA Hour from last week. And this is about a minute of CM Punk giving his interpretation of what happened with Jack Perry.
What happened?
Jack came back from his match. I was the next match. I'm sitting there. I got people with me. I'm not going to say who they are, because I got a lot of friends who work there, and I wish them all well, and I don't want them to be punished because they're friends with me, And I walk up to him, and I'm just like, Jack, why do you insist on doing this dumb internet shit, like on TV, And he's just like, well, if you got a problem about it, do something about it. And I was just like, man, come on, man. I'll fucking kill you. Like, what are we doing, And it just, it's like Chael says, sometimes you just can't let you get close, I thought I was doing a responsible thing, I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody a little bit. Samoa Joe was there, told me to stop, and then I quit. I turned to Tony and I said, this place is a fucking joke, man. You're a clown. I quit. I went to my room, and then Joe and Jerry Lynn came and got me, and they're like, let's just go out there and kill it. And I was just too fired up, and I'm fired up now, and I'm probably going to regret, talking about all this shit, but that's what happened.
So there you go. That was CM Punk's interpretation of what happened from his account. And then, so the footage airs, and you can see Punk walking up to Jack Perry, and they spend, I would say, 20, 30 seconds speaking. We obviously can't hear what is being exchanged, but it's definitely, I would say, semi-confrontational here in terms of, Punk is like right up into him. So the idea that Jack Perry was getting into his space, not really the case. Like they were pretty close up here for the duration of their discussion.
Is that what Punk said, though?
Punk said, what Chael would say is like, don't, I can't remember the exact term that he gave. But nonetheless, they're exchanging words here.
I don't think Punk, at least in retelling the confrontation, said that Perry came up to him. That chail line was more so in reference to, I guess, when somebody is in your face, you act however, whatever Chael said.
So like, don't get too close. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, so then Punk goes to essentially go for like a front chancery on him. Like,
So the shove was...
he shoves him
the
first, and then
The shove is the most important thing, I would suggest. And then Perry retaliates with like what looked like, at least some attempt at like a double leg or something like that.
Punk clearly initiated the contact.
And so Punk, I guess, defended using a guillotine.
And then quickly everybody comes in. Now, just looking at this,
and also let's just continue here, because every detail is very important. Punk defends with the guillotine. They knock into the monitors that are situated right behind here. This is presumably where Tony Khan is situated.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, Gorilla.
We never see Tony Khan, but
No,
it is very much assumed that he is seated to your far right.
This is where he would be sitting. This is where you normally would sit for a production like this. And Joe comes in, Paul Turner comes in, they break it up, and Jerry Lynn, who's an agent, and Chris Hero steps up from behind the desk. He's this gentleman right here, also sitting near Tony, next to a monitor. He comes out and he also joins in trying to break up the fight.
And the key here is that when they start to restrain Punk, like there's a side that's taking Jack Perry, like they're separating the two, and you can see Punk, and assuming that Tony Khan is to your immediate right, like at 3:00, like Punk is like lunging towards that direction and being held back. And it is
now define lunge, because I think that is also going to be something that defenders will.
I mean, putting his weight in that he was going in that direction and was furious. And if he was not being held back, I can't tell you if he was going to get physical with Tony Khan. But he was clearly moving his weight into that direction to go at Tony Khan. He was not just screaming at him. He looked like he was about to make contact with Tony Khan and is being held back.
I think that is a fair interpretation of one person's viewing. Yes.
And yeah, I mean, those are all like,
and presumably this is where, according to the interview with Ariel Helwani, this is where Punk presumably says that this company is a joke, and then he left the scene.
Yes, and you're just seeing, Malachi Black would pop up here with Punk. They're checking on it. I believe that would be Chris Harrington in the bottom left corner as well. So, I mean, like, there were a lot of witnesses to this as well. Like,
my God, that's a whole room full of people who saw this. And I think, I mean, we just heard from Punk. Now, can you think back to like all the other reports that might have been out there? Were there any notable sort of mistruths or because I feel like what I saw is how I pictured the event in my mind based off of the reporting.
The only thing that I was curious about was like how many people were around that would have had a pretty good idea of what happened. And it's like a fair amount here, not even taking into account of, if we assume Tony Khan was there at the right, were there others seated there, because they would have been like as close up as possible. And on top of that, this conversation between Jack Perry and CM Punk, it's going on like, I say 30 seconds. It's not like that's an insignificant amount of time if voices are starting to raise. Like, this is happening where it's within earshot, if not right in the eye line of Tony Khan. Like, this is happening. Again, like it does, we're reaching a bit here, but when you talk about the fact that here was CM Punk at the press conference back at All Out in 2022 and feeling brazen enough to get all of this dirty laundry out there as his boss is seated next to him. And here, I mean, he's about to initiate physical contact with a coworker right in front of his boss as well. Like, this was obviously...
So he did initiate physical contact with a coworker.
Did, yes.
Yeah.
And,
okay, yes.
And again, like, we can now piece this together with, I mean, Punk's mindset, which I don't think is stunning to people, but I mean, I don't think this man's job security was his priority here. That he, I think was mentally checked out by this point. And the idea of getting into a fight with a coworker right in front of your boss, I don't think that was something he was weighing in terms of that being a consequence.
Well, there was clearly some sort of mental anguish, and from the interview we know, like, he was not in a very good mental state at all, like, at this point in his employment, and this, at least to me, seemed like the thing that would have driven him over the edge, and at least that's what his actions looked to me like. So, my take though is that it's kind of how, like, I would respond to a similar incident in a schoolyard. CM Punk was the first to lay hands on a colleague in this situation, and therefore I think he was wrong. I think that's inexcusable. I think especially for somebody who had already been involved in a physical confrontation during his employment, and it's especially irresponsible for somebody who's supposed to be a role model in this locker room. But that doesn't completely, dissolve Jack Perry of, wrongdoing. But I think for his part, it's a lot more difficult to know what he's, what he should be blamed for, because we have no audio of this incident. We know he did mention the real glass line. That shouldn't have provoked enough to cause a coworker to push you. But we also don't know what was said in this verbal exchange, So not to say like Jack Perry should receive equal punishment as CM Punk, but is Jack Perry deserving of what we could presume to be his punishment now of not being on AEW TV and being forced into joining the House of Torture? I'm not sure.
That punishment does not fit the crime in any way, shape, or form.
Well, clearly he's in for a push now, and this is a way to bring him back.
So let's talk about, like, that's essentially like the video. I would say that, like, if this was an isolated incident, and we are talking about CM Punk here, does that change your view on how this is handled by AEW? And I'll add the fact that, like, for me, if this was on its own of two guys that just, a line is uttered, there's some issues between these two, and it escalates to this, it is a big star. I would say that probably would not be necessarily grounds for releasing someone if this is contained to this. But if you're coupling that with this guy on this big show, and his attitude is this company's a joke, that to me would actually be pushing me further towards like what damage am I doing by having this attitude in my locker room as well? If this guy is so mentally checked out that looks at this company as a complete joke,
shouldn't the press conference at All Out be?
I'm saying I'm assessing this as an isolated incident where Brawl Out does not happen. I mean, when you compound all of this, I think you arrive there. But if this were just strictly isolated and this comes out of nowhere, other than some pre-existing issues between these two that escalate to a fight,
was this enough to fire somebody?
Yes.
Maybe not, but that's not all. That's also, I'm not sure. I really don't know, and I think
it's kind of it's a useless exercise.
A big part of this, John, is the question about whether or not there was cause for Tony Khan's life to feel threatened, and it's really hard for us to know because we can't even see Tony Khan. We could see what Punk did here. We could see Punk's, what could be interpreted as lunging, but given the level of aggression that
this man is fully being restrained by Jerry Lynn. Yeah. Like this is, and he is like, so I see some people in the chat room that are debating about whether or not it's lunging. Again, it's to me, the only question is whether or not this would have held up in court. Okay, part of the reason why I believe Tony Khan might have even given that very public reason of saying his life that he felt threatened. I really do feel like there might have been some legal ramifications of it because for fear of a wrongful termination suit. Now, if this were to end up in litigation, would this footage have held up if Tony were to say, I fired this guy because I felt like he was a danger to, the people around me and myself? I don't know. I can't give you like a legal opinion on this.
I think there's at least an argument to be made, at least, from my very stupid eyes and mind.
I mean, we know that Punk was fired with cause, and it's not like he responded with a lawsuit and claimed, wrongful termination or was fighting this. But anyway, that was the video. I think that it, you can certainly discuss.
Do you think CM Punk lied in the Helwani interview?
I think he definitely painted a much more calmer picture for himself than the incident warranted. I think you can watch that, and even without audio, I think you can state that who was the one that initiated things. It was CM Punk who took things to a physical level.
So I don't think he lied. I think if you read the transcript of his words, it probably happened exactly as what he said. But it was the tone that was conveyed suggested a far more peaceful and calm demeanor than I think the volatility of this footage showed. But that's all just kind of, up for interpretation. Anyway, so now that we kind of have that out of the way, like, okay, do you think AEW should have aired this on TV?
No, I don't. I don't think there was, beyond the one night curiosity, we saw how they attempted to turn this into an angle. I thought this was just really, it almost felt like they were trying to justify the reason to air this by shoehorning it into this FTR Young Bucks match. It said it all when the Bucks are out there with FTR later in the show and the crowd starts, not the whole crowd, but at least enough that it was audible. You get a CM Punk chant at an AEW show.
So I saw a video online where this crowd was they were cheering the footage like it was an actual fight, like they were watching a UFC fight. And there, at least from the vantage point I saw, there were very loud CM Punk chants during the fight and in the aftermath of the fight as well. So they clearly came up with the storyline reason I don't buy the idea that they needed this footage to tell the story of the Young Bucks versus FTR. I think that's totally bullshit. I think this is Tony wanting to put this footage out into the world, using his characters as a means to do so.
Who are you supposed to sympathize with after this video airs? Like, who are you supposed to be rooting for?
That's dependent on the opinion of the viewer, right? Oh, you mean in storyline? You're supposed to be for people who want all of this conversation to be over. And this is what makes the FTR response very, very interesting. But first, I can't help but feel while even watching this. I mean, Tony, I was prepared for anything. I was open-minded enough to feel like I could change my mind. Heading into this, I thought it was a bad idea, but Tony seemed so sure that this would result well for the company that I was like, okay, maybe this is all worthwhile. I still come out of this feeling like this is a very petty use of your national TV airtime to respond to one man's ramblings on a podcast by making such a big deal out of it, but whatever, pettiness is kind of part of professional wrestling, and some of the most interesting things in wrestling has come out of one person's idea. It's just that there was a time where I felt like AEW was presented as sort of the Lamborghini of professional wrestling to the WWE's, mass produce Honda. The brand that provides a premium, classy product, but for a smaller fan base. But this, to me, diminishes it. It's already kind of been diminished. This is a company that would rather be a Honda and is trying really hard to be a Honda, and in fact might actually end up more so being a Kia. So I mean, this is, to me, Tony Khan choosing to wrestle with the pig. But let's all enjoy the show.
Well, I will say that coming out of this, I don't think it really built up nor hurt FTR and Young Bucks for the pay-per-view. I don't think there's some wave of interest suddenly for this match. I don't think it accomplished that in any way, shape, or form. To the thought of, would this embarrass CM Punk? I don't think it did. I think that if you were a CM Punk supporter, you're even more emboldened by this guy that is... If you believe CM Punk is someone that is lives and dies with his convictions, he confronted someone, he wasn't embarrassed here, he was the aggressor, you're still cheering and a CM Punk fan after watching this. This was not a case of him losing face, or even, comparing it to the Ariel Helwani interview. It's not like he told some 180 story of what happened and looked like a fool either. I didn't think there was a high probability that Punk was going to come out of here scathed, and that was not the case here. For Punk, I would be, if I was Punk, I'm not referencing this in any kind of way. It's like I'd be positioning myself as like, this stuff is like below me, and you're not going to get my acknowledgement of it in some ESPN interview or on TV or interviews or anything like that. I don't know if Punk will go that route, but yeah, I don't see how you would.
Let's just say, I agree that I don't know if I see Punk like referencing it himself, like going on like on Raw and like cutting a promo addressing this. Maybe he might reference it, who knows? But if the next time he's on the MMA Hour or being interviewed by somebody else and he's asked about it, how do you think he responds?
I mean, I don't know how he felt about this. I don't know if he watched it. I don't know if he has. I don't know if he's seen the footage before. Like, he may have never seen this footage, for all we know. I mean, he said after All In, he never talked to Tony Khan again afterwards. It would suggest that, like, he was not part of any, like, he was fired that week. So I'm imagining he hasn't seen the footage as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hard to say. But I think what you described as that sort of like response of just ignoring it and being above it is really the way I wish AEW responded to CM Punk's online podcast interview, you know?
Yeah, they feel like they got rattled by this, and it just, like, there's a time for this. There's a time to punch up, and I just didn't feel on this show.
What's punching up to CM Punk on a podcast? A really, really respected podcast that a lot of people listen to, but you're not fighting WWE here. You're fighting one guy.
That's the next segment.
Fighting WWE, sure. Okay, shall we talk about FTR's response, which I found very interesting as well?
They come out, and if I was on the fence at all about this segment, and man, was this WCW 2000? The words that were just like an arrow to my cranium. FTR, this isn't on our format sheet.
Oh man, I missed that. I think I was so like shell shocked from what I'd just seen. I missed the line.
This isn't on the format sheet, and I had to listen to this heartfelt promo with this dude who couldn't put on anything other than a Bart Simpson T-shirt for this promo.
Well, he wasn't expecting to come out on TV.
Why was he here?
You know, see some friends.
Okay. Cash asks, what are we accomplishing by airing this and giving the Young Bucks a built-in excuse? I'm sick and tired of hearing and talking about this. Everyone is ready to move on from this. Instead of talking about the best work that we've ever done, we're airing videos from 8 months ago. We're going to beat the Bucks at Dynasty, and we are sick of you petty little bitches. And then Dax takes the mic. All right. Bless y'all, but I just got to get this out here. And he says that the Bucks like to brag about the fact that they were able to create all these jobs for people, and says, you know what? Maybe without the Bucks, I'd still be shaving this guy's back, in reference to the good old days with the Revival. And FTR has eclipsed the Bucks as the best team on the planet. The Bucks no longer care about the letters AEW. They only care about the letters EVP. And we are building this for all the fans who spend their money to buy a ticket. Yes, the Bucks may have built the foundation of this place, but we put the roof over this house, and we're going to blow that roof off at Dynasty. And that was their retort here, to at least get the focus onto this match at Dynasty. But I think that there were a lot of people that would be co-signing with the sentiment of Cash Wheeler's promo here about just moving on from all of this. And I don't think your heat is on the heel Young Bucks. The heat is on AEW, the company. And you are, instead of trying to make, it's the Bucks are the heels that are admonishing like the actions of this unnamed individual who we won't state by name, and yet your audience is more, I feel, sympathetic to that side, because his surrogates are the ones that are speaking on behalf of the average fan here that wants to move on from all of this in Cash Wheeler.
Yeah, Cash and FTR are the baby faces here, and the baby faces' voice is typically what is presented as, I think, more of the truth. So AEW, seemingly Tony Khan himself, you know, if he wrote this, acknowledges that the world wants to move away from this, yet he is the culprit of dragging this back up. I mean, he would probably say CM Punk would be the culprit of dragging this back up, but certainly this is making this way bigger than I think, you know, CM Punk did.
Coming up on Collision, followed by Battle of the Belts. Tony Khan was on the phone during the confrontation. We've got the audio of what CM Punk yelled at him.
Yeah. Oh, believe me, there are gonna be plenty of like AI apps that'll like fill in the gaps and provide plenty of audio for all of us to enjoy of that footage.
Yeah, the alternate angles that'll be on YouTube.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just I don't know.
I wouldn't have aired this way. I understand there was immediate interest in seeing this in a vacuum, but for the company, no way. I'm not airing this. I just thought it came off really desperate, and I thought it just it really just felt like grasping instead of the like scrappy underdog that is galvanizing its fan base. I think a lot of their fan base, it's like, this is the kind of stuff that, yeah, there might be momentary interest, but is this in the grand scheme of things, like you're going from your Lamborghini analogy to a Honda. And that's what
I drive a Honda. So
I think that's going to be the analogy everyone takes.
No shame. Great mileage. I think there might be at least some excuse in them being able to say, hey, like we know that people don't want to see this. That's why we're making the baby faces argue against airing footage like this. But man,
what's Jack Perry's statement when he comes back? Like, is he a baby face? Is he a heel? And if so, what is his?
He's a heel. He's a heel, right?
And what's his message?
CM Punk caused me to get kicked out of here and beyond.
And is Punk the default like baby face in this picture that he's describing when he comes back?
Yeah. And CM Punk is already like, well, I guess like if you're gonna take what Cash's promo, Cash is kind of saying like everybody's bad in this and we should just all move on. Like it's sort of the Adam Copeland. By the way, Adam Copeland really is the one that looks the worst coming out of all of this.
I don't disagree. Like 1 week ago, that speech, and then this is what's happening this week. I mean, if I was Adam Copeland, I would have been second guessing like doing that promo last week, and then this week it just feels as though like they did the complete opposite of what this like mission statement was supposed to be last week.
Adam Copeland came out and said, "Wrestling is fun. Let's all enjoy wrestling, no matter which brand you cheer for." And essentially, like forget the tribalism and don't pick a side. And then Tony comes here, airs this footage, and divides the whole wrestling world. It was like he was Moses here. All this did was stoke the flames way bigger than they were before. If you're an AEW fan, you probably still be a defender of all of this. If you're a Punk fan, you're probably going to defend CM Punk's actions in some way. So it's a topic of conversation again.
Well, it's time to move on from addressing WWE personalities, because after a video for Danielson and Ospreay, Renee brings out Will Ospreay in his finest sweat gear, and he mentions that he asked for 5 minutes, and Tony Khan said, okay, you've got 5 minutes. TV time is expensive. Yes, we can't be just wasting TV time when it can be utilized for better reasons. So he says that he has been accused of not loving the grind. I was like, oh my God, are we seriously going to be going back now to Paul Levesque's comments on the Pat McAfee show last week? He says, I fly in here every week from England and I'm delivering the best matches ever. And I usually wouldn't take the bait. And the guy who is accusing me of not loving the grind is only in the position he's in because he was grinding on the boss's daughter. So now we've gone into a time warp, and suddenly it's 2001 for our critiques of Paul Levesque. He said, you have no idea what my goals are, so you can take this as a jab back. Don't throw stones at an assassin with a machine gun.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't know if
Will Ospreay and Paul Levesque at Double or Nothing, right? Right underneath CM Punk against Jack Perry. Okay. I think they're doing an excellent job with the top two programs on this show.
So, I mean, I don't know if Ospreay acted on his own with a line like this, or if there's like a greater mandate from AEW to say like, hey, whatever you heard on the internet over the past week, use this airtime, respond to it, whatever you want, go ahead. Whether or not that's healthy,
everyone watching knows what you're talking about too. Everyone knows.
Whether or not that's healthy is to be debated. But I think AEW has set a precedent clearly as a company that expects its audience to be on the internet. that expects its audience to know all the news that's going on, all the viral clips that are out there, no matter how, I don't know what podcast that they're from. And I don't completely dislike that. Like, I think the fact that it's catering to this sort of base is like kind of what made AEW popular in the first place. I also don't exactly dislike, like, you know, a line from, like, this is punching up. Like, this is Will Ospreay taking a shot at, like, coming off of this weekend, the leader of a new era in Paul Levesque. I also weigh the creativity in which somebody takes that shot. And in my opinion, I thought Ospreay did well here. He didn't take too much time. He only used 1 or 2 or 3 lines, almost as if, like, you know, like, okay, this is like, you're beneath me. I'm only going to spend a few seconds on you. And like in rap battle fashion, I thought he did well. You know, this to me, compared to what Tony is doing in retaliation to CM Punk, felt way cooler. Like, it felt like just a guy using a little bit of airtime, like a fire line out there, airing his grievances, like in a very short.
Do you think Renee knew this message was coming? she seemed like
I'm not sure.
But I thought we were just going to talk about Dynasty here. Listen, I will say
Ospreay delivered the shot and then moved right into business. You know, and
if this was not following what it did, I don't think I would have had as big of an issue with this, because it was. All the points that you made, I think this on its own, I don't think would have been a big deal. Like, sometimes you do throw out your shots and such. I would still question if, like, everyone quite knew what exactly he was even talking about here from a larger sense. But when it was following what it did, I just thought the two things together, it just felt like a company that was so rattled. That's what it felt like in totality with what it was following in the very next segment with this. And, like, quite frankly, this is a pretty tough week to be critiquing Paul Levesque and you're only in this job because of who you're married to, which just feels like a 20-year-old. Anyway, it was a shot. I mean, we're not breaking this down.
He felt the need to defend himself when, I mean, it felt kind of obvious to me, at least in listening to the quote, that it was directed at least at people like Will Ospreay, who maybe at one time received an offer from a WWE, but cited, you know, a lesser schedule as part of the reason why they joined AEW. I felt
he could have taken it personally, like Adam Copeland could have taken it personally.
Yeah. I felt like this was an opportunity for Ospreay not just to, I guess, defend himself, but also to raise his stock by going after somebody big. That is very different from CM Punk or Tony Khan going against CM Punk, because Tony is bigger than CM Punk. Okay, maybe not in fans, but like in terms of like stats, like what you have in terms of your resources, you own a company, and to use an entire company's resources to focus on one person for some words that he said on a podcast. I just thought this was way cooler. He, in like 2 or 3 lines, I thought he did a very amicable job.
Then Julia Hart followed. You know what, Stephanie McMahon? No, she said that she is going to kill Willow's spark, turn her smile into a frown, and make sure that Willow never touches her crown. It rhymed, and it's her destiny to be TBS champion. Then, after all that, here we are, an hour and 18 minutes. We go to our second match of the show. This is Hook, Jericho, and Shibata against Shane Taylor, Lee Moriarty, and Anthony Ogogo in his first Dynamite match since 2021. It's a lot of Hook selling, and then leads to a big German suplex onto Shane Taylor. And then Shibata gets the tag, baseball slide dropkick to Moriarty. And then, as Shibata is crawling to his corner, Jericho yanks Hook off the apron, preventing the tag, and is telling Hook, "Listen to me." And Hook is annoyed here that Jericho is getting in between them, and it leads to a rear naked choke by Shibata on Moriarty, but then Taylor nails Shibata, and Lee hits the Fang, pinning Shibata in 8:16. Hook is pissed at Jericho, kicks him out of the ring, and Hook tends to Shibata as Jericho is apologizing as he's going up the ramp.
Yeah, a very storytelling, like, focus finish here. I think it's a positive that that's moving in a positive, like, in any direction here, with Jericho clearly being heel now. It is coming at the expense of, I think, what AEW has kind of, you know, more traditionally offered its audience, a more clean finishes and just like, pure in-ring booking. So I sense mixed results for this on many of the finishes on this show.
Renee interviewed Dustin Rhodes. The match is still on, and he gave a promo that he is here for business, and it's grit, work ethic, passion, and glory. That's what I do.
Passion, drive, and patience.
Kazuchika Okada defeats Cristiano Argento in a minute 21. Just very basic. Okada was very unimpressed with Argento as he just looks into the camera, but still conveys, like, even the announcers are like, man, he looks bored. And he hits him with a drop kick and the Rainmaker in a minute 21.
I realize it's been rare for us to see Okada in just like a plain TV squash match against, somebody that we've never heard of before. So I took it as an opportunity to just kind of see what he would do with it. And I thought his cockiness continued to really, really shine, despite not speaking much of the language, like the facial expressions and the way he carries himself. This is, to me, was the closest we get to the type of Okada that we saw Big Brother Kaito Kiyomiya so hard. And I love it.
He accepts the challenge from Pac for Dynasty. So, I mean, this pay-per-view, for all we can say, I mean, it is shaping up to look like another incredible AEW pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. And then Pac comes out and is jumped by the Young Bucks, and this leads to the CM Punk chant from the crowd in Charleston. The FTR run in, and they go after the Bucks. Shatter Machine gets stopped as Okada uses a chair, and then they super kick FTR and deliver the EVP trigger, and they leave FTR and Pac laying. And I would love to see a 6-man here before the pay-per-view, but they only have a few episodes to go before the show. But maybe we get this on Wednesday next week. That would be a great 6-man to set up the pay-per-view bouts.
Yes.
The Acclaimed and Daddy Ass, they showed the recap from Supercard of Honor where they jumped the Bang Bang Gang. And we go to Jay White and the Guns backstage, and Jay White says that after beating the hell out of Billy Gunn, he wants more. And I was like, oh, God, please. I was like, did all this negative publicity, they're just going to lean in and think, well, let's do this. But then he clarifies he does not want to face Daddy Ass again. Instead, he tells the Guns to go find me an opponent. And boy, Sherlock Holmes here, they track down the ultimate opponent, Matt Sydal, for Rampage. Which, I mean, it'll be a fine match on Friday. But, I mean, it's quite the roster. It's like, hey, we came up with Matt Sydal for you.
The leader of the BCC, the captain of the BCC.
The captain, yes.
Yes.
Then the Charleston Championship Champagne Toast. This is what it consisted of, okay? Thunder Rosa came out. Toni Storm came out, threw champagne in her face, and then rubbed her face paint off with a towel until Deonna runs out. And because she is blinded by the champagne, Thunder Rosa takes a swing at Deonna, who says, F this. And the full-blooded Italian, Deonna Purrazzo, just storms to the back. And that's that. And Shivani explains, Thunder Rosa didn't even know that was Deonna. I was like, this was our latest segment where there was way too much going on here for like a 60-second segment.
I mean, they were trying to sell Rosa versus Storm, and then also a feud between
Thunder Rosa and Deonna. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mariah May against Anna Jay. They mentioned May defeating Momo Kogo at Supercard of Honor. May takes her to the floor. They're exchanging chops. During the break, Shivani was just on another level here. So what's the name of that hold, you smart ass, to Excalibur? And Excalibur, that's a straitjacket. And Jay is hitting forearms in the corner, running spin kick in the middle, and then an iconoclasm. May then lands the hip attack, only gets a 2 count, and counters the gory bomb for a sunset roll-up, pinning Anna Jay. And then Anna Jay attacks her, applying the Queen Slayer after the match. And then Mina Shirakawa comes down, chasing off Anna Jay, and she gets the excess champagne from the last segment. And they do explain their reunion that they had on Friday and the Club Venus history. And they have a champagne toast. And then Mina Shirakawa just kisses Mariah May.
Which, from my research, is something that they've done prior in Stardom. So, including the champagne toast. So, I mean, I don't watch Stardom. So, I look forward to maybe Karen's discussion. But it seemed like this might have been a callback to it. And I say that I only, cool, but nobody knew who Mina Shirakawa was. They set this spot up for this big sort of big save from one of Mariah May's former associates, And I happen to be at Supercard of Honor. I know who Mina Shirakawa is. I know she wrestled on was it Rampage recently? What did she do? She did an AEW match.
I can't remember.
Okay, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Okay,
they set the spot up for her as if like, holy shit, it's Mina Shirakawa. And you know what? Like in my mind, I'm like, yeah, like I like her a lot. She's great. But the vast majority of the people watching Dynamite have no fucking clue who this person is, and I feel bad for her. I feel bad. Like I think it just they need to do more of the legwork. And I know this is the big debate about like, oh, you know, do the research yourself. Do the research yourself. I think if you're trying to set up a moment like this of somebody coming in for a big save, the company needs to do a little bit for you, or at the very least explain it for you afterwards. And
okay, she did one match on Ring of Honor in March, and she beat Anna Jay, of all people.
Okay, great. So, like, was that relevant at all to this? No, it wasn't. Like, there was no relevance to this other than like just a reunion of two former Club Venus members and maybe just a callback to like the Ring of Honor thing. Like this was just an Easter egg for people that liked that knew of this tandem from Stardom, and that's fine to put in once in a while. But when you're putting it in such a profiled spot to close the segment, they needed to do a little bit more to explain.
We go to Alex Marvez, who brought his notebook of questions for Mercedes Moné, who again, they emphasize her in-ring debut will be at Double or Nothing in May. And she says she is a game changer. She wants to become the TBS champion, and she cannot wait to watch Julia Hart and Willow at Dynasty. She knows that Julia Hart has Willow's number, but Willow is a force, and she is dangerous. Which I would argue, if she's got her number, then does it matter what force or danger that Willow's bringing? It doesn't, like, I've got your number means I've got you figured. Like, this is a layup.
I mean, somebody could still be dangerous. Like, you know, you can go hunt a bear. You could be an experienced bear hunter, but
the bear will always have your number in that situation.
Oh, okay.
You don't need the security footage to see each person's point of view on who wins that one.
What number would that be? I'm curious. What is like what are we talking about? Phone number? Where does that saying come from?
I don't know the origin of the term.
I've got your number.
I'm sure.
I've got your email. I've got your Twitter handle.
Maybe it's. I can't tell you the origin.
Okay.
Alex Marvez.
So, what did you think of this Mercedes promo? We got.
I wasn't even done yet, but we could be done. I thought this was an extremely memorized. Like, it just felt like so unnatural, this interview.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, I don't think Mercedes Moné has found her voice that is not written word by word and feels, whether it is or not, she is talking as though this is going to be such an important match and I am the CEO. It's just like, I don't feel anything with this promo. And this was like a sit down chance to, like, it just felt very rehearsed, very mechanical in delivery.
And by all means, like, this is the type of thing she should be doing in order to, like, get that practice in. But I suppose I'm a little surprised that we have to talk about her needing practice after spending so much time, like, in the WWE. I don't remember feeling this way about her promos, at least to this extent in the WWE. And I wonder if that's just because, like, she's swimming with like sharks here in AEW, you know, like people who up and down the card can cut like really authentic sounding promos. But Mercedes has not found that. You know, this sounded like it was like very reliant on like catchphrases and cliches. Like it almost sounded like it was AI generated, you know, like her verbiage. So
and you're tapping into something real. Like, this could have been the chance. Like, talk about this injury. You've been out for a year. Like, that's something you don't have to manufacture emotion. You've lived this. This has been the biggest setback of your career, this injury. And you could really give people like an insight into what this last year has been like. Like, you have stated in your own words, you were told this could end your career. Like, convey how significant this injury was. And like, this should not be a struggle to get into. Like, sometimes you are taking preposterous storylines and having to falsify your level of engagement in it. Like, this is a story, like this comeback, this injury, what it means. Like, you do not have to be searching for the realness. It's provided for you.
it could be that this is all leading to a heel turn, and it could be the heel turn that maybe unlocks, a different sort of style of promo from her.
Rampage on Friday. Jay White against Matt Sydal. Julia Hart against Layla Hirsch for the TBS title. Angelo Parker against Zach Knight, and Orange Cassidy against Alex Reynolds. Battle of the Belts has Rocky Romero against Roderick Strong in the International title eliminator. And I don't think anything was announced for Collision.
I don't recall.
Okay. Samoa Joe, Dustin Rhodes, title eliminator in record time. Dustin Rhodes, paying homage to John Moxley, just busted open here when he is posted. And man, he had a gusher. Comes back. Audience does get into Dustin after the code red, and then a bulldog gets blocked. Joe fires at him with a big lariat. Rhodes grabs the title belt, but he thinks against using it, so he opts not to. Hits the crossroads. Crowd pop for the near fall, and then Joe grabs the chain. Paul Turner's like, you can't hit a man with a chain. Just give me that chain while I turn my back. So Joe grabs the title belt and just clocks Dustin Rhodes with this title belt and pins him. I thought this was a very unsatisfying finish for just such a, like, okay, let's just quickly go for, what kind of finish do we want? Ref turns his back, belt shot, pin. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if like these guys were cut for time or what, but like to me, the whole point of putting Dustin in this match is at least to somewhat maybe stoke the flames of his association with Cody and maybe drawing some sort of parallel like underdog story. I just didn't really sense any real drama here. You knew Joe was going to come out with the win. Even like the injury setup at the beginning felt like to me it was an attempt to maybe even the playing field to give us a more dramatic match where Dustin could go believably like, 50-50 with Samoa Joe. And I don't even think this really provided that. Like it was kind of a typical Joe beatdown, made him bloody, and then kind of beat him. So, it was just kind of there. And normally that's kind of fine. But like this was a show that hinged on attracting an audience for a publicity stunt in airing that security footage. And to me, like the success of the show was whether or not people would have felt compelled to stick around afterwards. And I don't know if this episode managed to do that. Like there have been way better episodes of AEW Dynamite just from at least an in-ring perspective.
One note, it was announced while we were recording that Collision, they are going to be doing Timeless Tony Storm against Azumi in our favorite. Actually, this is a women's world title eliminator match again. Mm-hmm. So it's a night of eliminators so far. We have 2 eliminators coming up Saturday night.
Cool.
All right. And then, the final bit of the show was just Joe continuing his attack on Dustin when Swerve entered, hit a big house call, and then he takes the chain and drills Joe in the face, and Lee holds the title as they go off the air. So kind of a reversal of last week when Swerve was the one that was beaten down and bloodied.
Yeah. I mean, I can't help but feel like all the wrestling just took such a backseat to the big story of this episode, which was getting to see that backstage footage. Like it almost, the rest just kind of feels so irrelevant.
Yeah, which I mean, sometimes the wrestling doesn't have to be front and center. If you've got like a big, like look at what we were talking about this past Monday. I mean, the wrestling was very secondary on Raw. It depends on what kind of, how you are selling your stories that week and how compelling the content is, whether it's wrestling matches or if it's promos or whatever it is. I thought this was a disappointing show. I think that it was way too, I would not have been airing the footage. If it does a rating, great. I don't think this is propelling any people that were not buying Dynasty to suddenly buy it because of this. I think if anything, it really confuses the message of the Bucks and FTR. I think it probably gained some sympathizers for CM Punk even by the end of it. And I don't even, it remains to be seen like how they weave Jack Perry back into the company and if he really gets anything meaningful out of this. I just think all the lines between the characters, I think it's so muddied from all of this that you are either, I didn't think it was a productive piece of business for the company.
I guess history will dictate whether or not this was a worthwhile event. On night one, I'm also of the opinion that I don't think this was at all necessary. But it did get a lot of people talking. And what is the end result of that going to be?
Well, we only have several people who can truly weigh in, and that is the feedback we have on the forum. So we've gone late here, so we will kind of condense these down, but let's get some of the thoughts.
Let's go, first of all, to some of these super chats over at youtube.com/postwrestling. We go live after every edition of Raw and Dynamite and SmackDown, but exclusively for Post Wrestling Cafe members at postwrestlingcafe.com. All right, let's go first of all here to Matt Hahn, who sends $5. Thank you for the super chat, Matt. Do you see them pairing Perry with the Bucks if they do bring Perry back? That seems pretty obvious.
How is he the scapegoat and they're the EVPs? Like, would they not be on opposite sides of this whole, like, why was he sent away?
Just because you're an EVP doesn't necessarily mean you might agree with the Tony's decisions. You know, like, they have power, but they don't have, like, top power the way Tony has. Like, the whole scapegoat.
Their whole characters, though, are that they have this control. Like, they
have a lot of control, but not as much as Tony. And you got to know the hierarchy of AEW VP-ness.
Right.
But yeah, like Jack Perry's whole thing is like, like fuck Tony Khan, right? So
great.
That's kind of the story.
Okay. That could be maybe that's all in at Wembley.
Maybe
return to Wembley.
Maybe
Jack
we'll
Perry
get more backstage footage.
Well, you do a backstage brawl. Yeah,
that's it. All right, let's go up next to Justin House, who sends $5. Thank you, Justin, and thanks for being a subscriber here. The more leverage Punk has, the more he is an asshole. Double or Nothing main event, launching of Collision, and opening All In. I don't think. I mean, it's not that simple. You know, it's a very messy web of events that took place. So I don't know if you can generalize just like that. But thank you for the super chat anyway. Let's go to that cool black nerd who sends $5 to say this episode being almost 24 years to the day of the Russo Bischoff reboot episode of Nitro is hilarious.
No, it is 24 years to the day.
Oh wow.
Yes. Definitely some parallels you could find with WCW in 2000.
Thank you for that. Let's go to Ryan G, who sends $10. What was the worst use of TV time? All in footage tonight or Jay White and Billy Gunn last week?
Okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Jay White and Billy Gunn has a very special place of just utter usage of television time being evaporated into the ether.
This will very likely do a really good rating, and it gets people talking about AEW, I suppose, good and bad. You know, and last week I just don't think did anything for anybody. Josh Cardenas sends $10 to say, I watched all but 2 episodes of Dynamite since it began 4.5 years ago. This hurt AEW by bringing his name up. This might be my last Dynamite for a while. Keep up the good work. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's go to Jake from the Windy City lastly, or second lastly, penultimately. My man Tony Schiavone passed through the big stories of Mankind's win, the finger poke of doom, bash at the beach, and now this. Bless his heart.
He's had a ringside seat for some of the finest.
He's had quite the career, yes. And lastly, let's go to Andy. I'm presuming Andy B, who sends 200 rupees to say, while Rock made for great weekly TV, the dynamic of Cody, the babyface on a hero's journey, versus the unbeatable champ was much more compelling. Great chemistry. Would have loved it more without run-ins.
Right. Is he talking about the Cody Roman Reigns match? I mean, you kind of had to do all that. I mean, it's just not the same match, and the Bloodline rules kind of stipulated it. I haven't seen too much opposition to the way that was laid out for night 2. Okay, let's go to feedback. We start off with Steve Grows Weed. In the context of a wrestling TV show, was that footage not every other backstage segment on the show? 2 people argue and it gets violent, so it lessens the impact in my opinion. But Punk didn't look physically provoked in any way. They really had to work hard to shoehorn that footage into this feud. I'm primarily an AEW watcher, but I can't defend this. Tony or whoever makes this call needs to grow thicker skin and stop openly punching up. And did not like this episode.
Go to Jordan from the Bronx, who says, I'm a bit wrestled out from being at Ring of Honor in both nights of Mania. AEW had one of its lighter wrestling nights I can remember. I wonder if that's a conscious choice, but I can say that it was welcome this week. The Punk footage being shown was a mixed bag for me. On the one hand, I can understand why. WWE personalities spent a good portion of WrestleMania week talking down about AEW in the press. AEW did the Let's All Be Friends promo with Copeland last week, and a complete 180 this week with the all-in footage and Will Ospreay's promo. I can appreciate them using the video to attempt to add heat to Bucks and FTR, while also giving Jack Perry something to come back to, I would assume as a victim heel. However, I can't help but think about Tony Schiavone's face at the end of it, where he looked like he was having butts in seats flashbacks. This is the type of stuff that we get reenacted on Dark Side of the Ring, but we have the actual footage. What if Arn and Sid or Joey Styles and JBL had video? This was a peek behind the curtain that we've never had before. It won't change anyone's mind. Punk fans will love him more. Punk detractors will hate him more. AEW diehards will continue to watch the show. AEW hate watchers will continue to justify their disdain for the product. I can't say that AEW is better or worse for airing it, but I was entertained by the goofiness of it all. Hopefully, we can finally all move the hell on.
Andrew from Cape Breton. The controversial footage was something to behold, despite not being all that impressive. My feelings on it are fluctuating. At first, I enjoyed that the Bucks were blaming FTR for it, and FTR coming out to tell the other side of trying to move on. I felt that they were trying to deliver what was advertised, and it was an obvious publicity stunt that they were trying to weave into the feud. Then I heard the Punk chants, which is an awful look. The footage is short, and it didn't show much. The biggest problem with it was it didn't change anything. People are criticizing and defending Punk, and all have different perspectives. The worst part about it was that it should have been put on last. After the footage, it felt like the show didn't matter as much. I thought that the Will Ospreay segment was much better. If AEW really wanted to be sympathetic and feel like underdogs, Ospreay did a much better job with his shots at Triple H for questioning his grind. It's important to take risks. This wasn't WCW 2000 bad, as some are claiming, but it could have been done better. Nobody's thinking about Ospreay's promo, Dustin's bleeding, Mariah May's love triangle, or Adam Copeland doing lucha moves. Dynamite is the best wrestling show with the most variety, and nobody is talking about that because of that footage.
I couldn't agree more. Let's go to Muggin. The damning footage from Wembley did the opposite effect. It just made AEW look worse off. It's like fighting with an ex over who gets the last word. Tony Schiavone's silence said it all. It made the rest of the show really distracting. Copeland Penta was very good, and are they really going for a whodunit story for Mercy? The shine is starting to fade if they don't get her in the ring sooner instead of later.
We go to Curtis from the 519. He says, coming off the last pay-per-view and attending the Toronto Dynamite, I was high on the product, the highest I had been in quite some time. I'm sure the Punk Elite drama will be discussed at length, so I'm going to stay out of it as I am beyond burnt out from it all at this point. As a once diehard AEW fan, I find my love for the promotion slowly dying each and every time this situation is brought up. I'm really looking forward to Dynasty. Ospreay versus Danielson and Swerve winning the title are two things I'm very much looking forward to in this era of AEW. Swerve is one of my current favorite members of the roster, and I'm excited to see him finally have his crowning moment. The Copeland match was excellent, and I've been loving his current run. So many fresh faces and talent for him to work with, and it's done wonders for his career. Really looking forward to more Cope opens.
Cody from Maine. The bickering between companies and their fan bases has gone on since before AEW ran their first show. Being the Elite invaded the parking lot during Raw, 100 dropped the piss and company line at the Hall of Fame, etc. The footage won't change any of that. Nothing will. Punk's end in AEW and everything after is the modern-day Montreal screwjob in terms of staying power. It's never going away. While the footage absolutely makes Punk look worse than what he tried to portray as he was the clear-cut aggressor, it's unlikely that anyone's opinion changes on him at this stage. So I understand those who wanted AEW to take the high road and ignore it, but I also understand their reasoning for not. Between Helwani's interviews with Punk, Cody, and even Josh Barnett, AEW's name was out there. Levesque further fanned the flames with the not-so-thinly veiled comments towards Ospreay. And on WWE's biggest week, AEW managed to get attention and built intrigue towards Dynamite, and then use that not only to strike back at Punk, but to try and further the storyline between the Bucks and FTR, while also setting the stage for Jack Perry's return. I can't currently view this as a mistake because of that. Time will tell, but I certainly can't agree with anyone who has the take of what was the point.
Let's continue on here. Let's go to Mark, who writes, I'm not really going to comment on the content of the show, but I do want to comment on something you guys said when you first heard the news that they were going to air the footage, specifically that this feels like WCW. How is that? Why doesn't this seem like one of many things WWF did throughout the mid-90s when they were fighting back and punching up against perception? Jim Cornette's opinion pieces on Raw taking aim at WCW, DX invading Nitro, Billionaire Ted, Brett screwed Brett, fake Diesel and Razor, I could go on. Why do we romanticize ECW's fighting spirit, whether it be Steve Austin shooting on Hulk Hogan and WCW, or Shane Douglas attacking Flair for years on promos, or Heyman's entire identity of us versus them? And when WCW was behind, they did their things too, revealing Raw results, Bischoff challenging Vince. But you know what? All of the things I listed didn't make the effort AEW did tonight. Absolutely none of these things were an attempt to spin into an angle such as tonight. They put the focus on FTR and Jack Perry. One, for a year plus, whenever Tony avoided commenting on Punk, he got eye rolls by plenty of podcasters and journalists. Tony does the opposite tactic now, and by many, there is ammo to attack and pearl clutching. The company, to some, literally cannot win. Second, this isn't WCW level stuff. This is pro wrestling. This is the same thing that has always happened for decades whenever there's a battle for attention and perception. AEW is simply following the tradition of punching up. I would state to this, Mark has his right to his opinion that others can have too. I would state all of those situations are different. If you're using Eric Bischoff challenging Vince McMahon as like a high point, that was just as dreadful.
So can I say why John said this feels like WCW? It's because that is the most famous example that we have of a cheap attempt at publicity using your airtime. And because I guess this feels like 90s WWF, like just doesn't resonate as much, at least to our base. Surely, yes, you can maybe say this has, I don't know, hit notes of like the Billionaire Ted skits.
The Billionaire stuff, go live through 96. Dude, that was not high art or anything of like, wow, they're really getting them. They look completely stupid with those.
But even those comparisons, I don't really see here because this is, again, I know what is it? What Levesque made comments on podcasts and such, but this is primarily focused on CM Punk, one guy, not one company, and therefore the perception of AEW being the underdog against CM Punk to me does not exist. CM Punk is the underdog against AEW. He's one guy versus a whole group of people and a billionaire, and I don't see that being the same. There's also something I think to be said for taste. When you're talking about ECW, and their fighting spirit being romanticized, Steve Austin shooting on Hulk Hogan in WCW, that stuff was good. AEW has done stuff on Being the Elite that I felt was very good at punching up. This was not
but cool. Again, the Ospreay thing on its own tonight, I don't think anyone's taking umbrage with that. If anything, I would have fine-tuned it into we're the company that this is pushing, this is where the best wrestle, and that's why I'm here. That's why Okada is here. They are choosing this over the WWE. I think that would not have received that same level of wouldn't have received any scrutiny, and I haven't even seen much scrutiny towards that. I think you can go through all of these examples here. I mean, the DX stuff with Nitro, again, it was who was coming off as the cool promotion there? Mm-hmm. It was WWF. That was a marketing campaign, not of just WWF being the young hip company. That was an equal marketing effort of the opposition being the old out of touch company that just has our former stars that a billionaire spent all of his money on, regardless of fact or fiction. But that was something that was resonating with its audience. It was a branding effort of making us the cool company in comparison to the outdated older product that is our competition. And that absolutely clicked.
Mark also says there might be, I guess, contradiction in Tony avoiding commenting on Punk whenever asked. And then he does the opposite tactic now and he gets attacked. This is not really the
he didn't address anything here.
This is not really the answer to, I guess, being asked about the topic in an interview. I think if knowing that what he feels now, he could have clearly answered a lot of those questions with a lot more honesty rather than saying, I don't want to comment on it. Obviously, maybe the Helwani interview was something that made him want to change his mind. But this was instead using something very real as a cheap ratings ploy, and I think it cheapens the reality of it, unfortunately. If he had simply stated exactly what had happened here in I don't know, more I guess maybe in a more news-based context rather than something being used in I think this sort of exploitive banner, I would have a bit more respect for it, but it just doesn't feel that cool to me.
You're up.
Oh, let's go to Jeremy, who says, I was live at Dynamite tonight. Interesting that plans changed just 30 minutes before the show. The RH announcer So not Dasha. Dasha was let go. Ran down the card for Dynamite at the start of the night and said that we would be seeing the backstage footage right at the top of the hour. It didn't end up being shown there. Apologies for the email, John. But when it was shown later, I was able to get a couple CM Punk chants going. Okay. As for
there was Jeremy starting the chant.
So it was you. As for the footage, nothing notable, pretty much what we already knew. I hope that they come back to Charleston. But when I arrived to the arena, they were outside trying to recruit people to come in and be seat fillers. They handed them wristbands, speaking to one, they were told to come back to the area 10 till 8. Okay. I don't need to know all this. I mean, they have seat fillers like all the time. Like I think maybe not some of these WWE shows, but like WWE has been known to do it. So I don't know if that's any sort of newsworthy thing. After Dynamite, Tony Khan came out and talked to the live crowd. He announced that RVD would be returning to the April 20th Collision. Justin Roberts also filled time teasing Tony Schiavone Appreciation Night. The crowd chanted for Tony to make a speech. Tony said Bryce Remsburg flunked out of college. Justin then teased that it was the ringside tech Bob Appreciation Night. All right.
All right. Let's do one more here because there's been a lot of feedback here. Luke from Quebec was definitely hard to focus on the wrestling tonight on Dynamite, as we all expected. This footage idea took away from the show rather than added to it. While I'm sure they'll get a small boost in the rating, it makes AEW and especially Tony Khan look bad. This doesn't add any heat to the FTR Bucks feud whatsoever. They would have needed an amazing creative idea to tie it all together, and it wasn't there. Ultimately, that's both the blessing and curse of AEW. Just like WWE in the Vince era, it's largely a one-man show, and nobody has the power to tell the billionaire when something isn't a good idea. At this point, I've really lost faith in Tony Khan being the right person to lead the company and its creative. The difference is that AEW doesn't have a son-in-law available to take over and steer the ship right. Well, there you go. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. We've gone long tonight, but there was a lot to go through from tonight's edition of Dynamite, as expected. So we will sign off, but back on Friday with Rewind-A-Way. So tune in, postwrestlingcafe.com. We will be going back to February the 18th of 2002. A simpler time in pro wrestling, wasn't it? When we just had, near-death experiences, commandeering of vehicles, and the tease of murder.
Well, anything is possible when you're talking about the NWO. All right? A lethal dose of poison injected into the WWE. Before we go, hey, I wanted to shout out especially, all of our patrons over at postwrestlingcafe.com, which is the best place to support the show, but especially our double ice cap and espresso patrons. Those are our higher tier members. They get other perks like John's audio updates. And if you're an espresso patron, of course, you get to choose your own edition of Rewind-A-Way. And we also like to put their names here in a little bit of a credit roll for all of our video viewers. So if you're watching on YouTube, you might see your name pop up if you're one of these patrons. Bye-bye.